There are 100 different kinds of tired in this world. There's the tired you feel after a long day at a desk, a dull ache in your lower back. There's the tired of a new parent, a kind of delirious, sleep-deprived fog. But then there's the unique, bone-deep, soul-level exhaustion that comes after a 24-hour shift at a firehouse. It's a tired that has weight. It's the phantom weight of 70 pounds of gear on your shoulders, even after you've taken it off. It's a tired that has a smell, a stubborn, clinging scent of stale smoke, sweat, and diesel that gets in your hair, under your fingernails, and into the very fabric of your being. If you're a first responder, or you love one, you know exactly the kind of tired I'm talking about. Go ahead and drop a comment below if you get it. Because that was me. Right at that moment, I was sitting on the bumper of engine 12, my helmet on the ground beside me, just breathing. The sun was rising, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. A peaceful backdrop to the controlled chaos of shift change. My crew, my real family, was moving around me. A symphony of familiar sounds. The sharp clang of a locker door. The hiss of an air tank being refilled. The low murmur of gallows humor that gets us through the things we see. We'd had a rough one. A 3-alarm blaze in a row of old brick townhouses that had eaten up most of the night. It was a good stop, we'd kept it from spreading, and everyone got out, but it was a long, brutal fight. My muscles screamed in protest with every small movement. A raw spot on my shoulder from my SCBA harness was stinging. But we'd won. That's all that mattered. My captain, a grizzled old bear of a man named Sal, clapped me on the shoulder as he walked by. Good work tonight. Torres, hit the showers. You look like you wrestled a dragon and lost. The dragon lost worse. Cap, I grunted, cracking a weary smile. He chuckled and kept walking. I closed my eyes for just a second, soaking in the brief moment of peace before I had to peel myself off the bumper and face the long drive home. And, of course, that's when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. My body tensed instantly. A call from my mother after a long shift was like getting a speeding ticket on your way home from a funeral. It was a special kind of insult, added to injury. I let it go to voicemail. But she immediately called back. A double tap. That meant it was important, or at least, what she considered important, with a deep, weary sigh. I swiped to answer. Maya. Darling, thank goodness. I was about to send a search party. Her voice was bright, musical, and utterly out of place in my gritty world. It was a voice that belonged to garden parties and charity luncheons. Hi, Mom, I'm here. Just got off shift. Oh, you poor thing, she said. But there was no real sympathy in it. It was just a preamble. You must be filthy. Please tell me you're going to shower before you sit on your furniture. You know how that smoke smell gets into everything. I squeezed my eyes shut. Not. Are you okay? Not. Was it a bad night but a complaint about the smell? That was my family in a nutshell. They were concerned with the surface of things, with appearances and pleasant smells. My life, my actual life, was a smudge on their clean, polished world. Yes, Mom, I will shower, I said, my voice flat. Good. Well, listen. I'm calling with the most wonderful news, she chirped, her energy ramping up. It's about your brother, Liam. The City Business Association just named him Developer of the Year. Can you believe it? For that beautiful new waterfront project he's been working on. There's going to be a huge awards banquet for him next month. Black tie. Your father and I are just bursting with pride. Liam, my younger brother, the golden boy. While I had been running into burning buildings, Liam had been climbing the corporate ladder. He was a successful, handsome, and charming real estate developer. He built shiny glass towers with spectacular views. I put out fires in dilapidated warehouses. He wore tailored suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I wore heavy, soot-stained bunker gear. He was, in our family's eyes, the sun. I was a distant, vaguely disappointing moon. That's great for him. Mom, he's worked hard, I said, the words feeling automatic. He certainly has. It's such a respectable, important job. Building up the city, creating something permanent. Not, I knew. Not like my job. My job was about destruction. It was about kicking down doors and breaking windows. It was dirty and messy and dangerous. It wasn't respectable. It was a phase they were sure I'd grow out of, even though I was now 36 years old and a 10-year veteran of the department. I remembered the day I told them I was accepted into the fire academy. We were sitting in their pristine living room. I had just finished my degree in sociology, and they were excitedly talking about law schools. The fire academy, my father had said, his face paling, like, with the trucks and the hoses. That's a job for, well, for men. Isn't it, men without college degrees? You're so smart, Maya, my mother had chimed in, her eyes welling with tears. You could be anything, a lawyer, like Liam is planning to be, a doctor. Why would you want to do something so dirty, so dangerous? They didn't see the calling. They didn't see the desire to serve, to be on the front lines of helping people on the worst day of their lives. They saw a step down, a failure to launch, a waste of my potential. And in the decades since, nothing had changed. Anyway, my mother's voice pulled me back to the present. The banquet is on the 15th of next month. It's at the Grand Hyatt downtown. We've already reserved a table for the whole family. You'll need to get a proper gown, something elegant. No more of those severe black things you always wear. A summons, not an invitation. My presence was required to complete the tableau of the happy, successful family, all there to worship at the altar of Liam. I would be the strange, silent figure in the family portrait, the one people would whisper about. That's the older sister. Yes, a firefighter. Can you imagine? No, not married. A bit of a black sheep. Mom, I don't know. Those things aren't really for me, and I'll probably have a shift. It was a weak protest, and I knew it. Don't be silly, Maya. You can trade shifts. You have to be there. Liam would be heartbroken if you weren't. That was a lie. Liam would barely notice if I was there or not. He loved me, in his own distant, self-absorbed way. But my life was an embarrassment to him. I was the gritty, blue-collar sister he had to explain away to his polished, white-collar friends. But the guilt trip was a time-honored tactic in my family, and my mother was a master. It's for the family, Maya, she said, her voice dropping into a tone of gentle, loving manipulation. We all need to be there to support your brother, to show the world what a wonderful, successful family we are. To show the world, there it was, the core of it all. It wasn't about support, it was about image. It was about public relations. My role was to show up, look as presentable as possible, and not mention that my hands were calloused from swinging a Halligan bar. I looked down at those hands. They were stained with soot. A new blister was forming on my right thumb. These were the hands that had pulled a child from a smoke-filled bedroom 2 weeks ago. These were the hands that had performed CPR on a man who'd had a heart attack, keeping him alive until the paramedics arrived. These hands were more real, more honest, than anything in my family's world, and they were ashamed of them. A wave of exhaustion, so profound it was almost dizzying, washed over me. It was more than just the lack of sleep. It was a deep, soul weariness, the weariness of fighting a battle you know you can never win. The battle for their understanding, for their approval. Okay, Mom, I heard myself say. The words felt like a surrender. I'll be there. Oh, wonderful, she exclaimed, her cheerful voice instantly returning now that she had gotten her way. I knew you'd do the right thing. Now, I have to go. I'm meeting the girls for tennis. You go home and get some rest. And please, scrub extra hard. She hung up. I sat there on the bumper of the fire engine, the rising sun warming my face, and I felt a familiar, bitter ache in my chest. It wasn't the pulled muscle from last night's fire. It was the old, chronic pain of being fundamentally misunderstood by the people who were supposed to know you best. I was going to have to go to that banquet. I was going to have to find a dress that could hide my scars and my reality. I was going to have to sit at a table and listen to them praise my brother for building shiny things. While I was an expert in how fast those shiny things can burn, I would have to smile and nod and pretend I wasn't a ghost from a different, more dangerous world. I would have to play the part of the failure so that my brother could enjoy his success. And as I finally pushed myself to my feet, my bones creaking in protest, I had no idea that this time would be different. I had no idea that this one, single night of dutiful performance, was destined to collide with the one part of my life I had always kept hidden. a part of my life that even I didn't fully understand. I had no idea that the hero they were looking for was already sitting at their table. The weeks leading up to my brother's banquet were a special kind of purgatory. My life was a cycle of 24-hour shifts filled with controlled chaos, followed by 48 hours of trying to scrub the exhaustion and the smell of smoke from my skin, all under the looming shadow of this stupid party. The main event in this personal hell was, of course, finding a dress. It sounds trivial, I know, a dress, but for me, it was a mission. Operation Hide the Truth. I found myself in the kind of department store that Liam's fiancé probably loved, a place with soft lighting and hushed carpets, feeling as out of place as a wolf in a petting zoo. I was looking for a very specific kind of garment. It needed to be formal enough to prevent my mother from having a public aneurysm, but modest enough to make me functionally invisible. And most importantly, it needed long sleeves. In a dressing room with a three-way mirror, I turned my left arm over. Running from my wrist almost to my elbow was a puckered, ropey scar, a permanent reminder of a kiss from a backdraft, 2 years ago. On my right shoulder, there was a patch of skin that was permanently discolored, the result of a chemical burn. These were my tattoos, my stories, and they were not welcome at the Grand Hyatt. I tried on a green silk dress. The saleswoman, a kind woman with tired eyes, said it brought out the green in my own. All I could see was how the fabric clung to the toned muscles in my back, a physique built by carrying people out of burning buildings, not by attending Pilates classes. It felt like a lie. I tried on a soft, floral number. It felt like a costume for a person I had never been. As I stood there, staring at my reflection, my mind drifted away from the department store, away from the impending misery of the banquet. It drifted back a year, to a cold, rainy Tuesday in October, a day that had started with a boring training session on hazardous materials and had ended on the national news. You guys probably saw it. It was everywhere for a few days. The I-95 bridge collapse. We were just finishing our morning coffee when the bells went off. The call that came over the dispatch was not a fire. It was a mass casualty incident. A fuel tanker had jackknifed during the morning rush hour, causing a multi-car pileup. And the resulting fire had been so intense, it had compromised the structural integrity of the overpass. A whole section of the bridge had pancaked onto the road below. The scene when we arrived was something out of a disaster movie. It was apocalyptic. Cars were crushed. Smoke was pouring from the wreckage. And a huge, terrifying section of the bridge was just gone. But the real horror was the part of the overpass that hadn't completely collapsed. It was hanging at a sickening 45-degree angle, a slab of concrete and asphalt held in place by a few strained-looking steel girders. And on that slab, teetering precariously over a 50-foot drop, was a blue minivan. My captain, Sal, took one look at it and his voice came over the radio, calm as ever, but with an edge of steel. "Torres, you're on lead for the high-angle rescue. Get your team. I want that vehicle secured 10 minutes ago." That's the thing about this job. There's no time for fear. Fear is a luxury, in the moment. All the training takes over. Your mind becomes a cold, clear machine, processing information, assessing risk, giving orders. We got to work. The rain was coming down harder now, making the twisted metal slick and treacherous. My team was setting up the anchors and the rope systems while I did the initial recon. As I got closer, I could see inside the minivan. A woman was in the driver's seat, her face a mask of pure terror. In the back, I could see 2 small children in car seats, both of them screaming. The van shifted, a horrible, groaning sound of stressed metal. The woman screamed. "Ma'am," I yelled over the noise of the rescue operations. "Ma'am, look at me. My name is Maya. I'm a firefighter. We are going to get you out of there." I had to be her anchor, her focus. If she panicked, she could shift the weight of the vehicle and send it over the edge. The rescue was a nightmare of logistics. We couldn't get a ladder truck close enough. We had to do it all with ropes. I was the one to go out. I was harnessed in. My personal safety line managed by my partner, a solid guy named Jake. My job was to get to the van, secure the occupants, and get them into rescue harnesses so we could pull them back to safety. One by one, the world narrowed to the task at hand. the slanted, broken asphalt of the bridge, the slick feel of the rope in my gloved hands, the terrified eyes of the mother inside the van. I got the side door open with a Halligan bar. The noise was deafening, but it was the sound of progress. "Okay, honey," I said to the little girl closest to the door. She couldn't have been more than 5. "We're going to play a game. It's called Flying Firefighter. You're going to be a superhero. Can you be brave for me?" She nodded, tears streaming down her little face. One by one, we got them out. First the girl, then her little brother. Each time, I would secure them in the harness, give the signal to Jake, and watch as they were lifted away, back to the solid ground that seemed a million miles away, all while the bridge groaned and shuddered beneath us. The mother was last. She was in shock, barely able to move. I had to practically lift her out of her seat. As I was fastening her harness, we heard it, a loud, sharp crack that vibrated through the soles of my boots. It was the sound of metal fatigue, the sound of failure. "It's going," Jake's voice yelled in my headset. "Maya, get out of there now." I gave the mother's harness one last tug to make sure it was secure and gave Jake the thumbs up. "Take her up," I screamed. As she was being lifted away, I scrambled back, my safety line, my only connection to life. I was still 20 feet from the edge when the section of bridge I was on finally gave way. It fell, not all at once, but in a slow, grinding collapse. A waterfall of concrete and rebar. I remember the feeling of falling for just a second, before my harness bit hard into my waist and I was left dangling in the air, spinning slowly, 50 feet above the wreckage below. The scar on my arm came from a piece of hot metal that sliced through my jacket as the van went down. I didn't even feel it at the time. All I felt was the immense, overwhelming relief that the family was safe. That night, it was all over the news. Helicopter footage of the dangling minivan, a grainy cell phone video of me being lowered to the ground by my crew. They called me a hero. The mayor held a press conference. For a week, I was the face of the fire department. And my family, I called my mother the next day from the firehouse. My arm bandaged, my body a single, unified bruise. "Mom, it was a really bad day at work yesterday." I'd said, "Did you happen to see the news about the I-95 bridge?" "Oh, that thing?" "It looked absolutely dreadful," she'd said, her voice full of a distant, impersonal horror. "All that traffic. It's a miracle no one important was hurt. You need to be so careful in that job. Dear. Anyway, I have to tell you what Liam did at his firm. He just landed the new Henderson account. And she was off. She had seen the biggest moment of my professional life. A moment that had nearly killed me. And it hadn't even registered. She saw a firefighter on the news. An anonymous figure in a helmet. She was incapable of connecting that hero with her daughter. The story she told herself about me, the aimless, slightly pathetic daughter in a dead-end job, was more powerful than the reality playing out on her own television screen. I had tried to tell her, but she hadn't been able to hear, so I stopped trying. Back in the dressing room, the saleswoman knocked gently on the door. "How are we doing in there, honey?" I opened the door, holding up a simple, long-sleeved black gown. It was made of a heavy crepe that draped instead of clung. It was the kind of dress my mother would call severe. But it was elegant. It was a fortress. It hid my scars. It projected a quiet, serious dignity. "I'll take this one," I said, as I paid for it. I felt a strange sense of resolve. The banquet was no longer just an obligation. It was something else. A final mission. I had spent my entire career hiding my life from them, to protect myself, to keep the peace. But all it had done was allow them to build a fantasy of my failure. It had allowed them to call a hero a nobody. I would go to their party. I would wear my fortress of a dress. And I would not say a word in my own defense. I would let their world and my world continue to exist on separate planes. But I had a feeling the universe had other plans. A tectonic shift was coming, and this time, I wasn't going to be the one to fall. Walking into the grand ballroom of the Hyatt felt like stepping onto a different planet. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and roasted prime rib. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their music a polite, elegant veneer over the roar of 100 conversations. The room was a sea of black tuxedos and glittering gowns. It was my brother's world, not mine. I felt like a firefighter showing up to a 5-alarm fire wearing a cocktail dress. I was dangerously out of my element. My family's table was, of course, front and center, a prime piece of real estate in the social geography of the room. As I approached, I could see my father holding court, laughing loudly with a man who had the soft, well-fed look of a banker. My mother was arranging and rearranging the silverware. Liam and his fiancée, a blonde, willowy woman named Ashley who worked in marketing, were a glowing beacon of success at the center of it all. Have you ever been the ghost at a family dinner, the one person everyone talks around but never to? You're physically present, but conversationally, you're a black hole. That was my designated seat. Drop me a comment if you've ever had to sit in that chair, because it's a lonely place to be. My mother saw me first, and a flicker of something annoyance anxiety crossed her face before being replaced by a bright, brittle smile. Maya, there you are. We were wondering if you'd make it. I said I'd be here, I replied, my voice neutral. She looked me up and down. My severe black dress, my simple hair. I hadn't given her anything to overtly criticize, which I think disappointed her. Well, that's a very somber choice for a celebration. Dear, but you look neat. Go on, sit down. You're next to your father. Of course, my father. Richard turned to me, his smile wide and benevolent. It was his public face, the one he wore when he was performing the role of proud patriarch. Ellie, kiddo. Glad you could make it. You're missing all the fun. He gestured vaguely at the room. Look at this, all for our Liam. Can you believe it? It's very impressive, I said, and the scale of it was. Anyway, Liam leaned across the table. Maya, hey, glad you came. He sounded genuinely pleased for a second, before Ashley whispered something in his ear and his attention was immediately drawn back to her. That was the story of my relationship with my brother, a fleeting moment of connection, immediately eclipsed by something more important, more shiny. The dinner began, and with it, the familiar ritual of my family's conversational style. It was a masterclass in polite, soul-crushing invalidation. So, Maya, my father began, after the salads were served. How are things down at the clubhouse? It's called a firehouse, Dad. I said for what felt like the 1,000th time. Right, the firehouse. He chuckled as if I'd said something charmingly rustic, still enjoying that little hobby of yours. Not tired of all the noise and the dirt yet. A hobby, my career, my calling, the thing I had dedicated my life to, was a hobby. The job that required me to be a paramedic, a hazardous materials technician, a structural engineer, and a trauma counselor, all in one shift, was a little hobby. It has its moments, I said, giving him my standard non-answer. I'll bet, he said, his attention already drifting. Speaking of which, Liam, I was talking to Bob Henderson the other day, from Henderson Holdings, and he said your waterfront project is the only thing the serious money in this city is talking about. Tell me about the new zoning variance you managed to push through. And for the next 20 minutes, I listened to my brother and father talk about things I didn't understand: zoning variances, capital gains, market projections. I didn't mind not understanding. What I minded was the tone. When they spoke to Liam, their voices were filled with genuine interest and respect. They asked detailed, intelligent questions. They listened intently to his answers. When they spoke to me, their tone was the one you use for a small child you're trying to humor. My mother tried to bridge the gap. Ashley, dear, you must be so proud of him. It must be so exciting. Being engaged to the man of the year. Oh, I am, Patricia, Ashley gushed, squeezing Liam's arm. He's just so driven. I don't know how he does it. I worry sometimes. You know the stress, but he handles it all with such grace. I thought about the stress of holding a collapsed roof up with a hydraulic jack, while your partner pulls a victim out from underneath. I thought about the stress of telling a mother that you did everything you could. But her son didn't make it. I took a slow, deliberate bite of my chicken. Well, some people are just built for that kind of high-pressure environment. My father boomed, beaming at Liam. They thrive on it. It's a sign of a superior constitution. Liam, to his credit, had the grace to look a little uncomfortable, He knew his sister ran into burning buildings for a living, but he didn't say anything. He never did. Defending me would have meant disrupting the family's carefully balanced ecosystem, the one that ran on the fuel of his success and my failure. My mother, sensing an opportunity to bring me back into the fold, however briefly, turned to me. You were always a bit of a daredevil yourself, weren't you? Maya, do you remember that time you decided to ride your bicycle off the roof of the garage? You broke your arm in 2 places. We had to cancel our trip to the lake. She laughed, telling the story to the table. It was one of her favorites. To her, it was a funny anecdote about my reckless, tomboyish childhood. To me, it was just another piece of evidence in the case they had built against me. Maya, the one who makes bad, impulsive choices. Maya, the one who inconveniences the rest of us with her antics. I was 8 years old, Mom, I said quietly. Yes, but the signs were all there, she said, laughing merrily. Always playing with fire, that one. She said it as a joke, but it landed like a stone. It was a way of trivializing my entire life. My profession wasn't a choice born of a desire to serve. It was just a continuation of a childish, reckless impulse. The main course was cleared away. The dessert was served. The conversation ebbed and flowed around me, making me feel like a rock in the middle of a stream. I was present, but I was not part of the flow. I listened to them discuss vacation plans to Italy, the merits of various luxury car brands, and the scandalous affair a member of the local country club was having. Their concerns, their entire world, felt like it was made of gossamer. It was so light, so fragile, so disconnected from the raw, brutal, and beautiful reality I lived in every day. And then, my father stood up. He picked up his wine glass and tapped it gently with a fork. A hush fell over our table. If I could have your attention for just a moment, he said, his voice full of a practiced, confident warmth. He wasn't just speaking to our table. He was speaking to the tables around us, who had turned to look. This was a performance. I just want to say a few words about my son. Liam. He placed a proud hand on Liam's shoulder. Tonight, the city is recognizing what we, his family, have known for a long time, that this young man is a builder. He is a creator. He is a man with vision and the tenacity to see that vision through. He has built a career, a reputation, and a future for himself that is solid, respectable, and a true source of pride for his mother and me. He paused, letting the words sink in, letting the praise wash over my brother. You raise your children, and you pray they make good choices, he continued, his gaze sweeping over his small audience. You pray they find a path that is both fulfilling and safe, a path that will lead to a comfortable life, a good family, and the respect of their community. You want them to build something, not run around putting things out. It was a glancing blow, but it was aimed at me. The room was cold, but I felt a hot flush of anger creep up my neck. I kept my expression perfectly neutral. Then he raised his glass. He was coming to the end of his speech, and I could feel what was coming next with a dreadful certainty. He was going to put a fine point on it. He was going to make sure everyone understood the comparison. We are just so blessed, he said, his voice thick with emotion. So blessed that he didn't get sidetracked by some youthful, idealistic phase, that he chose a real career. I am just so damn glad. And here, his eyes met mine for a fleeting, dismissive second that at least one of my children chose a safe, respectable path. Instead of just playing with fire, the final words were delivered with a sad, knowing shake of his head, as if he were mourning a daughter who had been lost to some childish, foolish whim. He had done it. He had taken my life, my calling, my very identity, and he had reduced it to a punchline in a toast celebrating my brother. He had held up my life's work as an example of what not to do. The people at the tables nearby, who didn't know the context, just smiled politely. But at our table, the air was suddenly thick and heavy. I saw Liam look down at his plate, a flush of shame on his cheeks. I saw my mother give a tight, pained smile. I saw Ashley look at me with an expression of pure pity. I did not look down. I did not flinch. I held my father's gaze. I let him see the absolute, unnerving calm in my eyes. I let him see that his words, which he had intended to be the final, crushing blow, had not crushed me. They had done something else entirely. They had severed the last, frayed thread that connected me to the person he thought I was. He raised his glass. To Liam, Man of the Year. A smattering of applause broke out around us. I raised my own glass of water, and in the dead, echoing silence in my own heart, I toasted him back, not to Liam, but to the man who had just, finally, set me free. After my father's toast, a thick, uncomfortable silence settled over our table, a pocket of dead air in the noisy ballroom. He sat down, looking pleased with himself, as if he'd just delivered a profound piece of wisdom. My mother immediately began fussing with her napkin, refusing to meet my eye. Liam stared at the centerpiece, a muscle twitching in his jaw. He knew his father had gone too far, but the filial loyalty, the lifetime of being the golden child, kept him silent. It was Ashley, my brother's fiancée, who tried to stitch the moment back together. "Well," she said, her voice artificially bright, "what a beautiful sentiment. To building things, Liam. You must be so proud of your father. He's so eloquent. It was a valiant, if clumsy, attempt at diplomacy. It gave them an out, a way to pretend the last 30 seconds hadn't happened." My father preened. My mother looked relieved, and the conversation haltingly restarted, carefully skirting the crater my father's words had left behind. And me, I just sat there, an island of calm in their sea of discomfort. Here's the thing about watching your family from a distance. You've created yourself. You see the machinery. You see the gears turning, the levers being pulled, their attempts to smooth things over, to pretend I hadn't just been publicly filleted, were fascinating to watch. They weren't trying to make me feel better. They were trying to make themselves feel better. They were trying to restore the comfortable illusion that we were a happy, normal family. And the insult had just been a harmless, fatherly observation. I played my part. I remained quiet. I ate my chocolate lava cake, which was sinfully good. I let their conversation flow around me. My non-participation was my new power. Before, my silence had been interpreted as meekness, as sullenness, as failure. Now, after the toast, my silence felt different. I could see it in the way they kept shooting nervous glances at me. My calm was unnerving them. They had dropped a bomb, and I had refused to detonate. Soon, the lights in the ballroom dimmed, and a man with a booming voice and suspiciously white teeth took the stage. He was the MC for the evening, a local news anchor whose celebrity was confined to a 20-mile radius of the city. The awards presentation was beginning. One by one, a parade of the city's business leaders took the stage. The Innovator of the Year award went to a tech CEO who had designed a new app for streamlining corporate expenses. The Community Builder award went to a woman who ran a chain of upscale organic grocery stores. It was a celebration of capitalism, of profit margins and market shares. To these people, this was the pinnacle of human achievement. I watched, not with judgment, but with a kind of academic detachment. I had once sat in meetings where the topic of discussion was the calculated risk of losing a multi-million-dollar drone to gain critical intelligence that could prevent a terrorist attack. The stakes in this room felt low, incredibly low. Finally, the MC said, "And now, to present our final award of the evening, the prestigious Developer of the Year award. Please welcome to the stage the founder and CEO of Harrison Development, the man who has literally reshaped our city's skyline, Mr. David Harrison." A wave of respectful applause filled the room. This was Liam's boss. This was the man my father spoke of in hushed, reverent tones. Mr. Harrison was in his late 50s, tall and lean, with a shock of silver hair and a sharp, intelligent face. He moved with the easy, understated confidence of a man who was accustomed to power. He didn't just own rooms, he built them. He took the podium. "Thank you," he said, his voice calm and resonant. "It's an honor to be here to celebrate the vibrant business community of our great city. We are here tonight to celebrate vision. We celebrate innovation. But most of all, we celebrate the builders. The people who don't just have ideas, but who have the grit, the determination, and the courage to turn those ideas into tangible reality." He spoke well, he was charismatic and compelling. The Developer of the Year award is given to an individual who has not only achieved remarkable financial success, but who has done so with an eye toward beauty, community, and the future of our city this year. The choice was unanimous. The man who has spearheaded the transformative Waterfront Renaissance project, a project that has brought jobs, beauty, and life back to a forgotten part of our city, is a young man from my own firm. It gives me immense pride to introduce the 2025 Developer of the Year, Mr. Liam Torres. The ballroom erupted in applause. My family's table was a cacophony of whoops and cheers. My mother was crying. My father was on his feet, clapping so hard his hands were a red blur. Liam, looking humbled and handsome, stood up, straightened his tie, and walked toward the stage. He shook Mr. Harrison's hand, accepted the large glass award, and stepped to the podium. He was a natural up there. He was charming, funny, and gracious. "Wow," he began. Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for that incredible introduction and for your mentorship. Thank you to the Business Association. I am truly humbled." He went on to thank his team, his partners, his investors. It was a good speech, a perfect speech. And then he turned to his family. "And of course," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he looked toward our table, "I have to thank my family, my amazing fiancé, Ashley, who is my rock, and my parents, who taught me the value of hard work and dreaming big. They always pushed me to build something lasting, something real." The unspoken contrast hung in the air, unlike my sister. "And to my big sister, Maya," he continued, and I stiffened. He was actually going to mention me, who has always marched to the beat of her own drum. "Thank you for always being you." It was the kindest thing he could think of to say, and it was still an insult. It was a public acknowledgement of my otherness. A neat little bow he put on my failure to conform. She's weird, she's different, but we love her anyway. The crowd gave a collective, gentle awe. They didn't see the knife, but I felt it. Liam finished his speech to another round of thunderous applause and returned to the table, a conquering hero. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations. A seemingly endless line of people came to our table to shake Liam's hand, to congratulate my father, to tell my mother what a fine son she had raised. I remained on the periphery, the quiet, dark star in their bright solar system. I was a footnote in my brother's story. And then Mr. Harrison made his way over. The crowd around our table parted respectfully for him. "Richard, Patricia," he said, shaking my father's hand warmly. "You must be incredibly proud. You've raised a brilliant young man." "We certainly are. David," my father boomed, glowing with pride. "He gets his business sense from me. You know." Mr. Harrison smiled politely. He congratulated my mother, Ashley, and then clapped Liam on the back. "A fine speech, son. You have a great future ahead of you." They all stood there, a tight, happy circle of success, and I was on the outside, looking in. About 2 feet away, I was getting ready to make my escape. The night had delivered all the data I required. It was time to exfiltrate. Mr. Harrison was saying his goodbyes, turning to leave. As he turned, his eyes swept past Liam, past my mother. His gaze was polite, ready to move on to the next conversation. And then his eyes met mine, and the world, which had been moving so fast, suddenly slowed down. It was just a flicker, a momentary snag in his smooth, practiced demeanor. He was still smiling, but the smile froze on his lips. His eyes, which had been a warm, sociable brown, sharpened with a sudden, intense focus. He looked at me, and his brow furrowed slightly. It was a look of deep, powerful concentration. The look of a man trying to access a file from a deep, forgotten archive in his brain. He didn't know me from our brief introduction at the table earlier. This was something else, a flicker of something real. He saw my face, my eyes, the way I held myself, and it triggered something. My father, completely oblivious, was still talking, and the next phase of the project is even more ambitious. But Mr. Harrison was no longer listening. His gaze was locked on me. He took a half step back. His head tilted slightly. The polite CEO was gone, replaced by a man seeing a ghost, a look of dawning, Thunderstruck recognition began to spread across his face. He knew me. He just couldn't believe it. Mr. Harrison's polite, corporate smile had completely vanished. His eyes, which had glazed over with boredom during my father's monologue, were now sharp and intensely focused on me. It was a look I recognized. It wasn't the look of a CEO assessing an employee. It was the look of a man trying to place a face from a moment of intense, life-altering trauma. My father, still rambling on about tax incentives, finally noticed that he had lost his audience. "David, is something wrong?" he asked, a hint of irritation in his voice. Mr. Harrison didn't answer him. He didn't even seem to hear him. He took a half step away from my father, his gaze never leaving my face. He murmured something under his breath, an absent, "Excuse me." And then he started walking toward me. The small, self-congratulatory bubble around my family popped. A confused silence fell over them as they all turned to watch this powerful man cross the few feet of empty space to where I stood. The forgotten satellite. My mother's hand fluttered to her pearls. Clara's brow furrowed in bewilderment. What could the great David Harrison possibly want with me? I remained perfectly still, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. I felt my training kick in, a profound calmness settling over my nervous system. I was no longer at a party. I was at an incident. And the situation was escalating. I just watched him approach, my breathing even, my posture relaxed. He stopped directly in front of me, his eyes searching my face with a desperate intensity. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low and raspy, completely different from the smooth, confident tone he'd used at the podium. "This is going to sound insane, but I know you." Out of the corner of my eye, I could see my family straining to hear. I gave him a small, polite nod. "I believe we were briefly introduced a few moments ago," I said, my voice quiet. "No," he said, shaking his head, dismissing the cocktail party pleasantries. "Not that, something else. I've seen your face 1,000 times. In my head." He closed his eyes for a second, and when he opened them, they were shining with a film of unshed tears. The bridge, the I-95 collapse last year. My blood went cold. "My brother, John, and his wife," he said, his voice cracking. "Their 2 kids, Sarah and Ben. They were in that blue minivan, the one that was hanging off the edge. And you guys." In that moment, you could have heard a pin drop. The air grew thick and heavy. My own family, just feet away, was frozen, their faces a tableau of utter, uncomprehending shock. "The news crews were there," Mr. Harrison continued, his voice gaining strength as the memory flooded back. "We watched it on TV, helpless. We watched as this firefighter, this woman, climbed out onto that broken piece of road. We watched as she pulled my niece and nephew out. We watched as she saved my brother and his wife. Just seconds before the whole thing went down. I never saw her face clearly on the news. Just a figure in a helmet, but the doctors, the hospital staff, they had a picture of her pinned up. The hero who saved the Miller family." He took a deep breath, his composure returning, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated awe. He looked me straight in the eye, and the power of his gratitude was a physical force. "You're her," he said, his voice full of wonder. "You're Maya Torres." He paused, glancing over at my stunned, silent family, a look of complete confusion on his face as he tried to connect the dots. Then he turned back to me, and he asked the question that would change everything, the question that would burn their entire world to the ground. "You're the hero firefighter." The words, a simple question, were a detonation for a full 10 seconds. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. It was as if Mr. Harrison had spoken in a foreign language that my family's brains were struggling and failing to translate. My father was the first to break. "Hero, firefighter," he sputtered, looking from me to Mr. Harrison and back. "What are you talking about, David? That's my daughter, Maya. She's a firefighter." "Yes, but..." He trailed off, his own words failing him as he tried to reconcile the daughter he thought he had with the woman standing before him. "A hero," my mother whispered, her face ashen, the bridge collapse. That was you," Mr. Harrison, now realizing the surreal, insane drama he had just walked into. Looked at Liam. His expression was one of absolute, staggering disbelief. "Liam," he said, his voice sharp with incredulity. "Your sister is Maya Torres, the woman who saved my family, the woman this entire city celebrated for a month, and you never said a word." Liam just stood there, his mouth opening and closing, no sounds coming out. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a dawning horror that was not for my safety, but for his own social standing. He had been celebrating his award for building things, while his own sister, the woman he thought of as a pity case, was famous for saving people from his own boss's family. The irony was so thick. It was suffocating. And that's when my family's shock curdled into something else. It wasn't pride. It wasn't relief. It was a hot, self-centered, defensive rage. "You," my father suddenly roared, turning on me. His face was a mask of fury. "You stood there and let me talk. You let me say what I said at dinner. You made me look like a fool in front of David Harrison. You made us all look like fools," my mother shrieked, her composure finally shattering, "letting us go on about our silly, trivial lives while you were this. Why would you hide that from us? Maya, why would you embarrass us like this?" Embarrass them. That was their first thought, not, "My God, my daughter is a hero," not, "My God, she could have died," but, "My God, my reputation, my image." And that was it, the final piece of data I needed. I let them rave for another moment, their accusations and their wounded pride filling the air. Ashley was trying to calm my mother. Liam was still catatonic. My father was advancing on me, his finger pointed at my chest. I held up a single hand. Not aggressively, just a simple, calm gesture. But it was so unexpected, so full of a quiet authority they had never seen, that it stopped my father in his tracks. The entire ballroom had become a silent audience to our little drama. But I wasn't speaking to them. I was speaking only to my family. "You want to know why I never told you?" I asked. And my voice was not the voice of their daughter. It was the voice of a woman who had commanded men in the face of death. It was calm, it was clear, and it was cold as ice. "I never told you because you never asked," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "Not once. I never told you because when that bridge collapse was the only thing on the news for a week, you were more interested in Liam's quarterly reports." I turned to my mother. "I tried to tell you, Mom. I called you the next day. I told you I'd had a bad day at work, but you were more concerned that I smelled like smoke." I turned to my father. "You want to know why I let you say what you said at dinner?" My voice dropped even lower. "Because I needed to hear it. I needed to hear you say it out loud. I needed you to confirm, once and for all, that the daughter you see is a complete work of fiction you invented to make yourselves feel better. You didn't see me. You saw a story you wrote about a failure. My heroism," I continued, a word that felt strange on my own tongue, "is not your trophy. The scars on my arms are not your conversation starter. The lives I have saved are not an anecdote for you to use to impress your friends. My life, the real one, the one with the soot and the sirens and the fear and the courage, it was never for you. You never showed the slightest interest in it, and you damn well didn't earn the right to be a part of it." I looked past them to Mr. Harrison, who was watching this whole exchange with a look of profound, dawning understanding. "Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice softening slightly, "I am glad your family is safe. That is the only reward that ever mattered. I am sorry this happened at your event." He just shook his head, his eyes full of respect. "Don't be," he said quietly. "Thank you." I gave him a small nod. Then I turned my gaze back to my family's shattered faces. "This is over now," I said, "all of it. The performance, the expectations, the disappointment. I release you from the burden of having me as your daughter." Without another glance, I turned my back on them. I walked away from the stunned silence, from the whispers that were beginning to ripple through the crowd, from the wreckage of their perfect evening. I walked out of that ballroom, not as a failure, not as a ghost, but as the hero they had never been able to see. And I was, finally, free. The drive home from the banquet was the quietest 10 miles of my life. It wasn't the stunned, angry silence from the dinner party weeks before. It was a clean, hollowed-out silence, The kind of quiet that's left behind after a massive fire has been extinguished, when the air is still and full of the lingering smell of ash and change. The fire of my family's making had finally burned itself out, and I was the only one left walking in the embers. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumphant. What I felt was a profound sense of finality. The role of Maya Torres, the disappointing daughter, had been a heavy, ill-fitting uniform I'd been forced to wear for decades. And that night, I had finally taken it off, folded it neatly, and left it on the floor of that ballroom for them to deal with. My small house greeted me like a faithful friend. The air inside was mine. The quiet was mine. For the first time in my adult life, I felt no sense of dread about the next phone call, the next holiday, the next obligatory performance. The war was over. I had survived. The days that followed were an education in the power of silence. I didn't call them. They didn't call me. I imagined my parents' home was a whirlwind of confusion, shame, and frantic damage control. My father would have to face his friends, his business associates. My mother would have to face the women at her garden club, and they would all have to grapple with the fact that the daughter they had so publicly pitied was, in fact, a celebrated hero. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. I went back to work. I went back to 24-hour shifts, to the comforting, mundane routines of the firehouse. I cleaned the truck. I checked my gear. I cooked dinner with my crew. We responded to calls a fender bender, a false alarm, a small kitchen fire, and with every normal, everyday act of my real life, the drama of the banquet faded a little more. It was their storm, not mine. I had simply been the rock they had finally broken themselves against. The first crack in the silence came a week later. A text message from Liam. I was sitting at the firehouse kitchen table, drinking a cup of truly terrible coffee, and my phone buzzed. Maya, I'm so sorry. That's all I can say. I've been a blind, arrogant idiot. I'd like to talk, if you'd ever be willing. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. I didn't reply right away. I let the message sit there for a day, a quiet acknowledgement that the new rules were still in effect. I was in control of the timeline now. My mother was next. Her call was a rambling, tearful monologue. It was a masterwork of self-pity disguised as an apology. Eleanor, it's your mother. She'd sobbed. Everyone is talking. David Harrison sent the most beautiful bouquet of flowers here. To you, the card said, with deepest gratitude and admiration. Your father won't leave his study. He's so humiliated. How could you let him say those things? Knowing the truth, you made him look like a fool. And there it was, even now, after everything. Her primary concern was how they looked. Mom, I said, my voice gentle but firm. He made himself look like a fool. I just sat there. You've all been looking at me my entire life, but you've never actually seen me. That's not my fault. That's yours. But what do we tell people? She cried. Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them your daughter is a firefighter and you're proud of her. Or don't. It makes no difference to me anymore. That was the moment she finally understood. Her power over me, the power of her disappointment. Her approval. Her shame was gone. I had taken it away from her. The rest of the conversation was short. She cried. I listened, but I did not bend. I did, eventually, agree to meet Liam for coffee. We met at a neutral, anonymous coffee shop halfway between my house and his gleaming downtown office. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I keep replaying it, he said, staring into his black coffee. Dad's toast. Your face. You didn't even flinch. It was like you were watching a movie you'd already seen. I was. I said, I've seen it my whole life. That was just the director's cut. I'm so sorry, Maya, he said, finally looking at me. His eyes were full of a genuine, painful remorse. I was a coward. I stood by and let them do it. Let them treat you like that. Because it made me look better. It made me the good son, the successful one. As long as you were the failure, I was the hero. And it turns out I had it completely backward. That single admission was worth more than 1,000 apologies from my parents. It was real. It was the truth. Why didn't you ever tell me, he asked, about the bridge, about any of it? I took a sip of my own coffee. My life is loud. Liam, it's messy. It's covered in soot. Your world is clean. It's quiet. It's built on things I don't understand. I guess I just thought you wouldn't be interested. I'm interested now, he said quietly. And so we began to talk. For the first time in our lives, we actually talked. Not as the golden boy and the black sheep, but as a brother and a sister, trying to find each other across a vast, smoky canyon of misunderstanding. The months that followed were a slow, awkward rebuilding, not of the old family, but the forging of something new. The dynamic was permanently altered. They were cautious around me now. Their conversations were full of hesitant questions. They wanted to know about my life, but they were afraid to ask. Their old currency judgment was worthless, and they hadn't yet learned the new one respect. My father tried to brag about me once at a barbecue. You know, my daughter here is a decorated hero. I cut him off immediately. Dad, I said, my voice quiet but firm enough for everyone to hear. We don't talk about that. My work isn't a party trick. He went red, and he never did it again. The truth is, my relationship with my parents may never be warm. It may never be what you see in the movies. They broke something that day at the dinner table, and my reveal at the banquet didn't fix it. It just exposed the fracture for what it was. But it is more honest now, and I am no longer their prisoner. My real peace, my real sense of family, I found where it had been all along, at the firehouse. A few weeks ago, we had another tough shift, another nasty fire. We were all sitting around the kitchen table afterward, exhausted, eating pizza straight from the box. One of the rookies, a kid named Miller, was telling a stupid joke. Sal, my captain, was complaining about his ex-wife. Jake was arguing about sports, and I sat there, covered in soot, my muscles aching, drinking a cold beer, and I was just happy, utterly, completely happy. These were my people. This was my family. The one forged not by blood, but by fire. The one where respect wasn't given based on your bank account, but on whether you had the guts to run into the darkness to help a stranger. And that's the real story. It's not about the dramatic reveal at the banquet. It's not about proving my family wrong. It's about finding your own firehouse, your own crew. It's about understanding that your worth is not something that is granted to you by other people. It's something you build, day by day, in the choices you make and the life you lead. They can call you a failure. They can call you a nobody. They can write a story about you that makes them feel comfortable. But you are the one holding the pen. You are the author, the editor, and the publisher of your own life story. Don't ever let anyone else tell you how it ends. Thank you for listening. If this story meant something to you, you know what to do. Like, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and in the comments, tell me about your firehouse, your chosen family. I'd love to hear about them. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you on the next one.